Well, greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome to, depending on wherever you may live or however you choose to read your clock, this early morning or middle of the night bonus upload. Before we jump into it, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost you a cent. Click that like button. It takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. And folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into this early morning or middle of the night bonus upload, shall we? Today's first encounter. It was early evening as the sun is setting in Oil City, Louisiana. A night watchman is making his way to his post. He's new to the job, and his post was at one of the many old derricks. This location is near Caddo Lake, as well as the surrounding swamps and marshland. He enjoyed his new job. All he really had to do in order to make it through the night was avoid falling asleep. This derrick was the furthest back from the particularly boggy section of the swamp. Since he had no boat available to pull through the muck, he decided to walk along the bank. It would take a little longer, but the trek through the swamp wouldn't be anything he hadn't done before, and he wanted to make a good impression to hopefully move his way to a higher-paying position in the day crew. A thick canopy of trees blotted out what little light was left, and he paused to light a kerosene lantern and continue on. As he held the lantern high, he looked into the darkness. There was nothing he could see amongst the shadows. He thought he had heard something moving in the darkness, but decided that it was his mind playing tricks on him. He began to walk. It wasn't long before he heard it again, and this time there was steps mirroring his own, just to the side and behind him. So he stopped and turned once again, holding the lantern high. "Who is that?" he calls out. He did not receive an answer. His pace quickened as he began to walk again and heard the steps start back up, once more mirroring his own. Now he heard sloshing in the nearby water and became unnerved. He started walking just a little faster, catching his feet on some exposed cypress roots. The sloshing steps are growing closer. His anger is building over the fear. He stops again. "Who is that?" he screams. Still no answer. An uneasy quiet descended over the swamp. He could hear the beating of his own heart and his quickened breath. Then from the darkness came a low, deep growl that reverberated in his chest. His blood ran cold. Without thinking, he turned and ran. He had nothing to defend himself with. His only hope was to reach it to the old derrick. He ran through the water and muck, and he heard this thing following him. Whatever it was crashing through the undergrowth, the water splashing as loud footsteps continued their pursuit. It sounded as if they were upon him when he finally reached the derrick and began to climb. He dropped his lantern. Fear and desperation caused him to climb faster. As he climbed higher, an unearthly howl emanated from just behind him. He thought his heart was going to stop and wrapped his legs around the crossbeams of the structure. It howled again and began shaking the derrick with unimaginable strength. It circled him, shaking and howling. The tears streamed down the watchman's face. He desperately hung on until the golden glow of the sun eventually began to rise. He heard the unknown beast walk off with a slow, methodical stride through the water. He looked below him, barely catching a glimpse of a tall, bipedal canine-like creature moving away from him in the dim light. As the darkness vanished and light lit the swamp below, he could see footprints in the mud where it had circled him. He stayed where he was until the daytime crew came. It took some time to coax him down, and after hearing his story and seeing the footprints, the men were at a loss as to what this thing could be. They sought out an older gentleman who lived there all his life, and he knew everything about these woods, creeks, and the bayous. He had looked around the area and then looked at the tracks. A serious and stern look came over his face. As they asked what he thought it was, he replied, "Rugaru." Silence fell on the group as the old man pointed his finger in the direction of the tracks, going deeper and disappearing into that dark cypress swamp. Then he said, "The rugaru is real. It's been here for a long time. I heard of one around here, but it is real." Today's second encounter. This incident occurred in Memphis, Tennessee. I started my career as a Memphis police officer a few years prior in the 80s. I was on special assignment at the time. It was roughly 2 a.m., clear summer night, but quite humid. I was in my personal vehicle with the top down and radio playing. I was still in uniform, including my bulletproof vest and a gun belt with all of the regular equipment attached. I was heading south on Covington Pike at a good rate of speed and was the only person on the road. This part of the road connects the Raleigh-Bartlett area to the Bear Clare area. The road is slightly elevated as the surrounding area is low, and running through it is Wolf River, which is a few miles from here and connects to the Mississippi. This area is commonly referred to by locals as the Wolf River Bottoms. As I'm driving in my peripheral vision over to my right, just outside of my headlights, I noticed something was moving fast directly toward the front of my car. I immediately slammed on the brakes, thinking that it was a deer running across the road. But I couldn't have been more wrong. It came to a screeching halt right in the middle of the road, right in front of my headlights, not more than 7 feet from my vehicle. As we both froze in place, staring at each other for several seconds. It appeared to be 3 or 4 feet tall, but it was crouched. It could have been closer to 5 if standing straight up. I got the impression that its current body posture was its normal way of standing. It had a large head, at least comparable to its skinny, slender body. It appeared to be a dark gray, greenish color, similar to the color of an alligator, but the appearance of its skin looked like the similar texture of a human's. It had dark, large, oval eyes on each side of its upper part of its face, running slanted from a top portion of its head to about a midsection of its head. It was kind of pointing inward to where you'd expect the nose to be. However, from what I could tell, there was no distinct nose. At least, nothing like a human. Below its eyes was a very thin, dark, almost black line, which I assumed was its mouth. It ran from about the same location as a human's mouth would be. However, the line ran straight across the lower part of its face in front, and they turned upward and slightly back on the head. It had no ears that I could see. Its body and chest area were rounded like a human's, but vastly smaller, almost like a child's. Its arms appeared to be longer and somewhat disproportionate to its body. They were skinny and had like an insect look to them. I could make out its hands, but they were completely folded at the joint of its wrist. The legs were also long, even with the thing's shortness. I could make out the top of them, even with it so close to the bumper, which was obscuring the bottom half somewhat. They were like its arms, thin and insect-like, and appeared to be jointed. I did notice its chest area moving slightly like it was breathing, but it seemed slow and steady. I never noticed anything like genitalia. It had no hair anywhere that I could see. I'm not even sure it was wearing any kind of clothing. If it was, it would have been skin tight. I never noticed a tail of any kind at that point. My adrenaline's pumping, and it was only a brief period of observation. It again took off with a shot, and it was out of my headlights. I could still make out its outline in the darkness, and it was moving like a sprinter. It leapt over the guardrail onto the other side of the road and down the embankment. I will admit that this was not the only bizarre incident during my career, but definitely the strangest. I never told anybody on the force about this. In fact, I only mentioned it to a close friend a couple years back. I can only identify it as a lizard man or some sort of unknown humanoid. I would have never believed it unless I had actually witnessed it. Alright guys, so some background on this photo. I actually looked for the encounter through my files, and I couldn't remember the exact state that it happened. I do remember part of the story, though. It was submitted to me by a female subscriber who had been out behind her house. There's some woods, and she had noticed something out by the tree, and obviously she thought it looked very similar to a Dogman. It was physical looking before she took the picture. As she took the picture, this is the exposure that she got from taking that photo. Whether or not that tells us that their body produces some sort of magnetism or energy that disrupts photographs, I'm not sure. I know that it's definitely creepy looking. But once again, I'm not sure. I'm not going to say, hey, this is 100% a Dogman. It resembles something like a Dogman. Once again, you'll never ever hear me say that a video or a picture is 100% authentic. The video that Kirk Stokes has and sent me a while ago is probably the most authentic video I've ever seen. And it's just truly an amazing video. So there are a lot of hoaxes out there, and I've debunked quite a few. But anyway, that's the story about the photo. I wish I had some more info on it. Maybe in the next day or two, I'll be able to remember where it was out of. So anyway, on to tonight's third encounter. I'm a 62-year-old man, and I've seen a lot of things. My mother and grandmother are Cree Native. I joined the Canadian Armed Forces. When I became of age, my folks drove me to the gate to walk into my new life. My mom told me that she was proud of me, and she was sure that I would do well, just to be careful when I was out in the wild. After my basic training, I was sent on to tradesman course and then on to my first post. I was assigned to a special service force in Ontario as a communication specialist, since my job included fixing telecommunication equipment. I had a top secret security clearance. We trained hard when I was there, and I was ready to go head to head with whatever enemy I would encounter on my missions. One day in December, we were transported via helicopter on a mountaintop close to the Algonquin Provincial Park for a week of winter warfare course. During this week of training, we each had to do guard duty. On one of those nights at around 2 a.m., I started hearing a strange voice on the mountain. That night, the temperatures were about minus 30 degrees. At first, I checked to see that everyone was sleeping in their tents. They were all accounted for. I scanned the area to see if I could locate anyone. There was nobody there, at least no one that I could see with my military-issue flashlight. I continued to hear voices for a while, so I decided to call out to whomever was out there. "Hello, who goes there? You're on Canadian Armed Force Base. Identify yourself." No answer. I kept looking for whatever might be out there, but I was still hearing those voices that sounded Asian. Some came from the right and others to the left. They seemed like they were having some kind of conversation. Since it was training and learning exercise, we had no ammo in our weapons. Not knowing what to expect, I did the second best thing I could do. I fixed a bayonet and kept walking around the camp. The voices stopped after a while. I was wondering who in their right mind would hike into the wilderness for at least 20 miles in such miserable weather just to pull a prank on us. That week, they closed down the base 2 times because of the cold. Of course, we stayed on the mountaintop. It was part of training, they said. My replacement came after a while, and when he showed up, the first thing he asked was what I was doing with a bayonet on my weapon. I didn't want to say that I was hearing voices down below us. I told him it was cold, that I decided to do some drill movements to warm myself up. I don't know if he believed me or not. The next month, there was a huge military exercise in Wainwright, Alberta. The entire brigade ended up there. One day, I was going on a call with my partner to do a repair on a piece of equipment that was out in the middle of nowhere. We had been driving for roughly 45 minutes in deep snow. We couldn't find the equipment. I was driving and decided to stop and check our location to find the target. My partner was looking at a topographical map while I was trying to see if I could locate a reference point. On our right, there was a forested area with pine and underbrush. On the left, there was an open field. At about 100 feet from the tree line at my 10 o'clock, there was a large white-tailed buck foraging in the snow. The deer was facing us and looking out into our direction. Then, out of nowhere, this monstrous creature blasted out of the tree line and aimed directly toward the grazing deer. It took less time for this creature to cover the approximate 100 feet of the deer than it took me to tell my partner to look. The creature grabbed the deer by its head. It was taller than the deer by at least 2 to 3 feet. It was reddish-brown in color with very wide shoulders. The head was pointed and set upon those shoulders with no neck. The arms were very muscular. The legs were like 55-gallon drums. Body was covered in long, shaggy hair. I wish I had more time to look at it and get more details, but everything went so fast. As soon as this creature reached the deer, it placed one hand on the top of the deer's head and the other on its back of its neck. Then twisted like it was a rag. Without even stopping, it headed back into the woods with the deer over its shoulders. I put the truck into gear and said, "Let's get out of here." My partner managed to find the trail leading to our destination, and we found the equipment. When we made our way back to the bivouac area, my sergeant asked me if everything went okay. I told him I don't know what I saw on our way to the other location, but it was pretty freaky. He looked at me and said that he did not want to hear about it, so I kept it to myself and walked away. As time went on and I grew older, I realized that I had witnessed a Bigfoot harvesting deer. I had a nice career in the Army. I did some missions and went to several UN peacekeeping missions throughout the world. I saw a lot of strange animals and witnessed many unusual situations. But that monster in Alberta was one I will never forget. Today's fourth encounter. This happened back in the spring of 2017. I was driving along Elk Grove Road just outside of Chicago, down Route 72. Elk Grove Road is a strip of blacktop inside dense Butte woods. This was in the middle of the day, late morning, but the clouds had darkened everything, so it looked like it was night. It seemed like it was going to rain. In the darkness, I saw what I first thought was a wolf or a coyote. It was in the middle of the road facing me, crouched over what appeared to be roadkill of some variety. As my car got closer, I slowed down and this hairy creature looked up at me. Its eyes lit up brightly, reflecting my headlights, and then it stunned me into a very long gasp as it stood straight up. It was bipedal, at least 6 feet tall. It was humanoid with a canine-like head and dark fur. It had an insane-looking glowish red eyes. I reached for my cell phone, but remembered that it was turned off. I remember staring at this creature as it was staring at me. All I could hear was my breathing and my own heart beating. The creature stood before me absolutely still. Then suddenly, with a sound like an unfurled flag caught in a breeze, two immense bat-like wings extended outward and upward from its back. When fully unfolded, the wings looked like a large glider. They were immense. Then the dust on the road kicked up as this beast slowly lifted off the road. It began to lift like a helicopter, no flapping of its wings. I watched it rise above the trees. The wings were still spread wide open. I floored the accelerator and got the hell out of there. I was concerned that it may follow me, but I did never not see it again. Later on that night, I told a friend, and he stated maybe I had seen the Chicago Mothman. I told him the Mothman is supposed to be something like a bird, definitely not like a wolf. I have no idea what I saw. I told my friend that this was definitely a bipedal canine with wings. The wingspan was at least 15 feet, membraned and bat-shaped. The overall color was a dark gray with black fur or hair. The head was wolf-like with a long snout, and the eyes were definitely glowing a reddish color and very menacing. Tonight's final encounter. I grew up in a small western Massachusetts town of Adams, just below the Berkshires. It was 4th of July of 2017. I was working in a cafe in town. I was working during the holiday. My shift ended around 5 p.m., and I had plans to go to the Bellevue Cemetery with some friends for some peace and quiet. I was tired of all the noise from the day and was not interested in the fireworks. I met up with everyone outside of my house, and we picked up some fast food before leaving. There was about 5 of us, and we all started walking down to the cemetery, eating and chatting. We made our way to the cemetery. Now, the cemetery is not huge, but it's big enough that we could find a quiet place to sit and hang out for a bit. After we got there, we all settled in under a tree. I relaxed and just listened while everyone else was talking. I was still reeling from work and how busy the day was. That's when I noticed something moving in the distance between the mausoleums. It was dark and I could only make out a shadow. I couldn't tell what I was looking at and figured the animal had come from down from the mountain and wandered into our town after smelling the barbecues. Then I saw whatever it was sprint from behind one of the mausoleums to the next. It was way too big to be a wolf or a mountain lion, but too fast to be a bear. It startled me for a minute. I couldn't imagine any animal I could think of being out in the day like this. It made me very nervous. My friends noticed a change in my looks of my face and asked what was wrong. I didn't want to say I saw a big scary shadow running in the cemetery. I thought they'd make fun of me, so I shrugged it off and said nothing. But I couldn't stop thinking about what I had just seen. Right then I saw the figure again. It sprinted back further into the cemetery, the first time behind the gravestone and then behind a tree. My curiosity got the best of me at this point, and I played it off like I needed to go for a walk. I headed in the direction of the shadow when I saw it take off again. I noticed it had an unbelievably large head. I couldn't tell how tall it was, but I knew it was bigger than any of us. And that quick glance that I had got reminded me of a man completely covered in fur. I just thought that my mind was playing tricks on me, but I was still very curious. I approached the mausoleum that I had been hiding behind. I looked down, make sure not to trip, and froze. In the dirt was an enormous footprint the size of my forearm, with claws right there in the soil. I started to panic and a little puzzled by something I didn't yet understand. I had never heard of the creature with a footprint so big in my entire life. I proceeded with caution toward the tree line it had ducked behind. I just needed to know if I was crazy or not. If we were actually in danger, I got to the tree and found nothing behind it. No one was crouching or hiding from me. That's when a cluster of leaves fell from the tree above me and hit me. I heard loud rustling as well. There was no breeze, so I slowly lifted my head to look up. There, glaring down at me, was this hideous dog-like creature with eyes shaped like a human but amber-colored and terrifyingly piercing. This dog-like monster was as long as the branch it was lying on as it slowly growled at me. I ran back to my friends and told them we had to go immediately. They protested at first, but then one of them caught a glimpse of the creature jumping down from the tree. She didn't get a good look at it, only the shadow, and all she could do was say, "Oh my God, that thing is huge." We all grabbed our things and made our way out of that cemetery. The friend that had seen the shadow asked me what it was, and I played it off, saying I didn't see the shadow, only signs of the coyote circling around, and felt scared. I did not describe the dog creature at all, or acknowledge it. I no longer live in that area and have not heard any encounters with dog creatures like that since mine. Maybe it went into the mountains and stayed there. Well, there you have it, folks. This middle of the night or early morning bonus. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is, after all, your support that keeps the channel growing and going, and honestly what gives people a chance and a place to share their experiences and theories judgment-free. Just simply treated with the respect that we all deserve. Thank you. Everyone stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real. They're out there and they are dangerous. Share this information with the people you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions. Never stop searching for the truth. And God bless.